Okay, hi everybody. Hello. And we are working now on Esoteric Astrology Adventure number 69. 68 was a lengthy one. We had 5 segments of approximately an hour apiece. And we will see how we go with this. I suspect it will not be as long. We are working on the area of Capricorn. And we will simply begin. We are on page 169. A study of the characteristics and qualities of the man who is born in the sign Capricorn, that not under but in, that means the sun sign is Capricorn, will reveal a great deal anent the human family, because the Capricornian can express all the worst of which a man is capable and all the best. As I said, we have the mountain of Capricorn, which suggests the heights, but also the inverted mountain, which suggests the depths, and together, of course, they are the diamond. It is a sign of extremes. You might almost say God and the devil, or the highest form of liberation on the mountaintop and the lowest form of enslavement. The moon is in detriment in the sign Capricorn, and this can be a good thing, but it can also be a sign, an indication of great limitation. It is the sign of extremes, and this is because at the time there were only 10 signs. Capricorn was the first on the ordinary wheel and the last on the reverse wheel. Now this, of course, presents an interesting situation, because I have been hypothesizing that the idea of Pisces offering the very first incarnation, go forth into matter, the first individual incarnation, and that is what the Tibetan says, does not square with a time in which there was no Pisces in the ordinary sense, Capricorn being the first sign then on the ordinary wheel, as if there were no response at all even to the lowest part of Pisces and Aquarius, which I consider unlikely, but that's simply hypothetical. The reason I consider it unlikely is because DK does tell us that the very first individual incarnation is taken in Pisces. But when we were working on the egoic lotus, I did talk about the knowledge petals. And the very first of the 12 petals, the very first knowledge petal, I assigned to Capricorn. And that fits quite well with the idea that on the ordinary wheel, going clockwise, Capricorn can be considered the very first sign. It's a sign of deep immersion of the soul in material conditions. And the consciousness, indeed, is in a great detriment in such a condition. So Capricorn at this time, when there were 10 signs, and we know that this is after individualization, and we have the fact that Leo and Virgo had been added to the wheel because individualization had occurred. Capricorn was then the first and the last. And of course it has the first ray and it has the 7th ray. And this, let's just say, the first and 7th rays are related to a condition in which this sign can be the first and the last. Okay, DK says Capricorn was first on the ordinary wheel and last on the reversed wheel. Something certainly was possible in Atlantean days. Let's say perhaps this was in Atlantean days. The third initiation was possible, but other initiations were possible in Lemurian days as well, and they could be indicated also by Capricorn. Esoterically, all the world's saviors and sun gods are born in Capricorn. And among them, we do have Paramahamsa Yogananda, and we have also Swami Vivekananda. We have, in the Western world, we have Albert Schweitzer. We also have Father Damien, born with the sun in Capricorn and Taurus rising, strongly under Vulcan, and I believe, according to what Master DK says, taking the fourth initiation just the way the initiate Jesus did. So esoterically, all world saviors and sun gods born in Capricorn, but also the very worst type of man. Hard, materialistic, cruel, proud, selfish, ambitious, and egotistic or egoistic. Hard, materialistic, cruel, that's one of the 9 heads of the Hydra. Proud, another head of the Hydra. Selfishly ambitious, not ambitious for the sake of the world, because we are told by Master Hilarion in his Light on the Path to work as one who is ambitious, but to be not ambitious, but selfishly ambitious, wanting the exaltation of the little self, and egoistic, with the eyes focused very much on the small center of consciousness and not on the larger whole. So those are very potent words, and they give us an indication of what the unregenerate Capricornian can be like. And for other Capricorn people who are not certainly of the worst type of man, there's probably a streak in them which reminds one of these negative qualities, just as there will be that streak which, if rightly developed, will lead to becoming eventually world savior and the sun god, the sun, as it were, rising on top of the mountain, indicating the third initiation, and in that third decade of Capricorn, the sun being very powerful, and indicating with Vulcan and Mercury a great luminosity, initiatory developments. The head rules the heart in such cases. We might say, in a way, that the throat center, ruled by Saturn, is dominating Jupiter, which rules the heart center. And we might say as well that will is powerful. Will is more powerful than the heart. Will and mind more powerful than the heart. The first and the third rays, unsoftened, unredeemed by the energy of love wisdom on the second ray. Whereas in the perfect example of the influences of Capricorn, head and heart are perfectly balanced. And here I think we can see something of the idea that Saturn, which is the head, let's say, and Venus, which is the heart, are perfectly balanced. But we see that in the Capricorn individual, the love, wisdom energy, represented by Venus in this case, comes in rather later in the day, as Venus is the hierarchical ruler and is not immediately felt or sensed in the Capricorn developments. But later on, of course, the heart comes in strongly in the initiate consciousness. And all the time the head and the mind have been there, Saturn being an example of the third ray and the first ray. It's a third ray monad, I do believe, perhaps a third ray soul as well. There is strong seventh ray in it, and much first ray. So we know the first ray is there because Saturn is in an alignment in a certain triangle which is Leo, Pisces, Capricorn, but Saturn, interestingly enough, is associated with Leo, the Great Bear, Shambhala, and the first ray, and is not, in that particular triangle, associated with Capricorn. There, Mercury is the distributor, and that's very interesting that Saturn, being the ruler itself of Capricorn, is not considered in the Capricornian alignment. Rather, it's in the Leo alignment connected with Shambhala. Okay, Capricorn rules the knees. Every sign of the zodiac rules different parts and organs of the body and different physiological functions. And this is, well, it's literally true, of course, because oftentimes there are arthritic conditions and difficulties with the knees, physically speaking, but it's also, says the Tibetan, symbolically true, for only when the Capricornian subject learns to kneel in all humility, and with his knees upon the rocky mountaintop, to offer his heart and life to the soul and to human service, can he be permitted to pass through the door of initiation and be entrusted with the secrets of what? The secrets of life. So the Capricorn subject here is making application to the life aspect, and not only to the soul aspect, because the life aspect does come in via monadic influence at the third initiation, where the monad begins to be a conscious factor in the life and not simply a powerful conditioning, though often unconscious factor. So he has climbed to the mountaintop, and it could be a scene of great exaltation, having reached that mountaintop through great and strenuous effort, but instead he kneels, thus indicating the impossibility of running away, thus reducing his stature, because height is related to pride in a way. So on his knees he bows low, as it were, reduces his stature. It's a gesture of humility and a gesture of subservience, and also of vulnerability, because you need your feet to run forward, to attack, or to run away. So it's a state of vulnerability, because on your knees you're pretty well in place should there be some menacing danger, and or even some other human being or animal or source of life that you would attack. You can't do it from your knees. So there is the sense of proportion being developed at that point, and the person realizes that he is not as tall as he may have thought. He does not tower over others. He allows God, as it were, or whatever is found on that mountaintop, to tower over him, offering up his heart, which has been developed after the second initiation. The astral body has become responsive to the Buddhic energy somewhat. Love is coming in. Venus is powerful at the second initiation, and moving on to a position of great power at the third initiation for the Capricorn individual. He offers his heart and life to the soul, to this consciousness which is not his alone, not his egoistic consciousness, but to that sentiency which is found in all human beings. And he will serve below, even though he has reached the heights. And then he can be permitted to pass through the door of initiation and can be entrusted with the secrets of life, which would be very powerful for negativity if misused. Only on his knees can he go through that door. And that's rather interesting, because in a number of the rituals that claim in a way to represent the rituals of hierarchy, there are some faint reflection of those rituals. Upon coming into the ritual chamber, you do have to stoop. You do have to pass under a barrier, which you could not pass if you were simply trying to walk through on your feet. You have to humble yourself. You have to lessen your stature. You have to virtually go down upon your knees. Kind of interesting, though, isn't it? Because if you think of it, Capricorn being the 10th sign, and at certain times in human evolution, we're not told exactly when, being the last of the signs, presumably with Aquarius and Pisces, no longer, or not yet, part of the energies to which humanity can respond spiritually, at least, you eliminate the Aquarius and Pisces part, because Aquarius rules the lower legs, the calves, and Pisces the feet, and they are not available for the use of the candidate. He is simply on his knees. Now, it's very difficult to locomote on one's knees, and naturally to be a great agent of service and a world savior, you do need your lower legs, and you do need your feet, and that will come in later. So that will certainly increase the power of service once the candidate has humbled himself and said, okay, you, God, or Sanat Kumara, the planetary logos, the solar logos, or the great presence are greater than I am, and symbolically I demonstrate that by lessening my stature in your presence. So as long as he arrogantly stands where he has not earned the right to stand, he can never safely be given the information which is imparted to all true initiates. And by true initiate, we certainly mean here one of the third degree, and not a probationary initiate. So at least of the third degree, the true initiate. And of course, after you are on your knees, there comes the opportunity for you to be able to stand. But it's only after having humbled yourself that you can stand in the presence. The first response, perhaps, must be to kneel in the presence to demonstrate your sincerity, your sense of proportion, and your realization that there are greater factors than you, your little tiny illusory center in this great planetary manifestation. The ancient mode of pilgrimage in India, which is, by the way, of course, a Capricornian country in its personality, interestingly enough, by which the devotee passed or progressed from one holy place to another upon his knees, is indicative of this deep need of the Capricornian for humility, deep need of the Capricornian individual for humility. That must have been a very painful passage on the knees, and very slow. I was in Tibet, and I did see a couple going around Mount Kailash as we were going around Mount Kailash, some 57 kilometers, perhaps something like that. It's a long way around the mountain. And they walked a few steps, and then they prostrated themselves completely. They were carrying these mats, of course. They didn't hurt themselves on the rough ground, but they laid down flat and offered their obeisance. And then they rose up and walked another few steps and prostrated themselves again. And that is the manner in which they were going around Mount Kailash. It would take months to go around in that manner, but it's an outward sign, at least, of a great inner humility. The sign itself, of course, does not guarantee humility. One can do humble acts with all kinds of attitudes that are not humble. But this couple were quite radiant people, and they were Tibetans, and they had a great humility about them as they were doing this. We passed them by. You know, we were walking, and we had yaks, and some were riding, and so forth. But did we pass them by? That's the question. India is ruled by Capricorn, and India knows this truth, the deep need for humility in the presence of the great presence, Sanat Kumara, the planetary logos, and still greater intensifications of the one and only presence in cosmos. Though India has permitted the physical act to usurp the place of a spiritual attitude, yet the symbolic meaning is eternally true. And I think that's always a danger for us, that we may find some form of observation which is symbolic in nature, and we may put all of our interest into that physical symbolic act and almost forget the spiritual attitude which it is meant to represent. And those who do not participate in that symbolic act will be considered as those who are not really humble, but yet their inner attitude could be even more humble than those who are going through the motions, if we know what we mean by that. When a man is born in Capricorn, when the man born in Capricorn can kneel in spirit, and in truth, he is then ready for initiatory process on the mountaintop. It takes a great sense of proportion and perspective. You think that much of that perspective will be gained with the widening of consciousness in Sagittarius as there is movement towards the Capricorn incarnation. And even in Capricorn, as one is climbing the mountain, progressively greater vistas are revealed to one, and these vistas produce a sense of smallness in the individual and a gradual diminishing of the egoistic attitude. But I suppose it's only on the symbolic mountain peak that one can have the entirely panoramic view of the unity of all that surrounds one and all that one is participating in. Then no part of the mountain can block the vision. But symbolically, at any other point on the mountain except for the peak, one's vision will be blocked by an aspect of the mountain that one is climbing. So, humility. A great lesson for the Capricorn individual and a great lesson for all of us. A great lesson for anyone who would become an initiate. DK has said that the beginner is always more consciously conceited than those with more experience. And conceit is possible, the inflation of the self, because one just doesn't see the wholeness very clearly, and so one sees oneself as of a greater stature in comparison with the diminished whole that one does see as greater than one is. But as the whole expands, the stature of the individual diminishes more and more until one becomes, as it is said in Leo, the relinquished point. The symbolism underlying the astrological fact that Mars is exalted in Capricorn, whilst the power of the moon is lessened, that's called detriment in that sign, and Jupiter and Neptune both fall, is significantly beautiful and instructive. I think we can learn a lot by studying the exaltations, detriments, and of course the rulerships and the falls. Mars is the god of war, the producer of conflicts, and in this earthly sign, Capricorn, Mars triumphs in the early stages of evolution, of the fourth grade of hierarchy. So we see that exaltation means an empowerment, but it doesn't necessarily mean an empowerment for that which we call good. An empowerment, but not necessarily for that which we know as good. Okay, so in the early stages of evolution of the fourth grade of hierarchy, in the life history of the undeveloped and average man, so Mars, the undeveloped average man, and the early evolutionary stages of the members of the fourth grade of hierarchy passing through the human kingdom, War and conflict is the norm. It is the way of life. This is the fourth kingdom of nature. There is great conflict within it. But Mars leads into conflict without necessarily seeking harmony, but rather the triumph of one vision or ideal over another, although eventually it may lead to harmony. Mars may, in a way, give way to Mercury, just as is the case in Aries. Interestingly enough, Mars gives way to Mercury in Aries, as the exoteric ruler gives way to the esoteric ruler. And in Scorpio, Mars also gives way to Mercury, but it's the esoteric rulers, both of them, giving way to Mercury as the hierarchical ruler. So the non-illusory vision achieved in Scorpio under Mercury is even greater than that achieved in the esoteric position in Aries, because there comes the real defeat of illusion, i.e. in Scorpio, under hierarchical Mercury, which represents the Buddhic plane, which can see through all illusions because the aspect of separativeness is completely overcome. Materialism, the fight for the satisfaction of personal ambitions, and the conflict with the higher spiritual tendencies go steadily forward. All of this under early Mars. All of this under early Mars. When I say early Mars, it means the response of early man with his early form to Mars. It's not as if there is really a phase of Mars which are earlier or later. Mars is an energy, but forms which are in early, middle, or later stages of unfoldment will respond to this Martian energy in particular ways. So we recognize these warlike tendencies, materialism, the fight for the satisfaction of personal ambitions, because Mars can be a very egotistical planet, ruling the entire personality as it does, and not having great breadth of vision, though much idealism. And the conflict with the higher spiritual tendencies. It's almost as if, well, what can we call it? Mars battle with Venus, or with Jupiter, or with some of these other planets that represent, like Neptune, for instance. Neptune representing the life aspect, Mars representing the objective, bloody aspect, Neptune subjective and watery nature. So Mars can be the planet of opposition in relation to many planets which represent the soul and wider consciousness. And hopefully humanity is transcending this addiction to the Martian energy and its tendency to fall under the sway of the Martian energy. I think we were told that Mars in 1945 had reached the height of its power on the astral plane and would then be subsiding. Let's just see if it's possible to discover this. Mars, 1945. Yep, there's one. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, yeah. Right. He's talking about the subtler senses will supersede the physical senses over which Mars has so long had a successful control. Mars being the five of the physical senses and also of the concrete mind, and that which obscures reality, the slayer of the real in a way, and hence again the growth in the world today of the psychic senses, which are not Martian, and the appearance on every hand of the subtler and more esoteric powers of clairvoyance and clairaudience. This development is inevitable as the influence of Scorpio and of Mars begins to lessen. The influence of Scorpio and of Mars begins to lessen, as is the case today. The year 1945 saw this influence almost completely vanish, particularly from the astral plane. Astrologers would do well to remember that the influence of the constellations, signs, and planets work out upon three levels of awareness, three descending levels, and are felt first of all upon the mental plane, then upon the astral plane, and finally upon the physical plane. So he's telling us, and we will get to this point, that astrologers shouldn't interpret mental and astral happenings as if they were really physical happenings. Well, anyway, whether that influence has come back, we cannot be certain, because we had a transit of Mars. At a certain point, Mars reached its closest position to the Earth, some 70,000 miles. I'm not exactly sure of the figure, but it was recently, relatively recently in the last few years. And we do see the uprising of certain Martian religions which seem to be conflicting with each other. So the possibility that Mars may yet revisit the Earth with its deadly force is certainly present, and there are many people who are sixth-ray souls who are under the influence of Mars and are acting that out very strongly in their language and in their deeds. So there was an interlude there when, for some years, Mars had left the center of the stage, and especially the astral plane, and so had Scorpio, and the opportunity for peace existed, but whether that was seized or not, and whether those conditions were developed so that Mars would not return in the same way, this remains to be seen. So all of these Martian qualities go steadily forward, and this most material of all signs, that's Capricorn, is the battleground of the old established order and the habits of the new and higher inclinations and tendencies. Well, I think you can see it right now going on in the world, as Uranus in Aries squares Capricorn, at least by sign, and Pluto is in Capricorn. So the wish, the tendency to inaugurate the new age under Uranus and Aries is fighting old entrenched tendencies in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn will bring to the surface all of these very old entrenched tendencies, and the established order is fighting to retain its prerogatives. And even as we are discussing this right now, it's going on in Greece right now, which is a Capricornian country from the personality angle, is experiencing the transit of Pluto, is undergoing a drastic purgation and reformation, the results of which we cannot determine. Will they be something new and better, or will they be disintegrative and worse? Certainly the old established order, the moneyed interests of the world, those under Scorpio who seek to corner the resources of the earth because they think they are entitled to them, because they believe in a certain type of social Darwinism, which is the survival of the fittest, even in the human race. So it's an innately competitive attitude. Those people are struggling to hang on to what they have. They are under the spell of Maya, glamour, and illusion, of course, and the larger possibility of identifying with humanity and sharing resources, and perhaps being vulnerable and non-insulated by that which one has accumulated of financial power. These things don't look very tasteful. They look distasteful to them, and so the battle is on in Capricorn, and this is exacerbated at this present time, at least, by Saturn in Libra squaring Capricorn and Uranus in Aries squaring Capricorn, and Saturn and Uranus have been opposing each other now for a number of years. So we are acting out right now what the Tibetan is discussing. And we are in the middle of the battleground, and the battle is becoming more obvious all the time, and the deep and entrenched ancient attitudes represented by Pluto are being dragged to the surface. So the fight with the forces native to the underworld is going on right now on the world stage amidst humanity, and people are pretty well aligning on one side or another, some with the hierarchy, even though they might not know hierarchy by name, and for human progress, and others for vested interest and the preservation of hereditary privilege and the general preservation of a selfish status quo order. Saturn in Libra can very much represent the status quo, but it won't be long before it's in Scorpio, which will indicate the necessity to seize the opportunity to face this dweller. Saturn in Scorpio can attempt to suppress many of these factors, but with Pluto in Capricorn that won't be so easy. So it's the battleground of the old established order and habits and the new and higher inclinations and tendencies, which lead to initiation, of course, which lead to initiation. India, governed by Capricorn in its personality, has been a battlefield right down the ages. And the great battle of Kurukshetra, which could have taken place, well, how long ago? Millions of years ago. I can't exactly say one, but perhaps in the fourth sub-race of the fourth root race, and at least 4 million years ago, and maybe longer. We, I think, would defer here to Philip Lindsay with his hidden history of humanity. He's very good and very scholarly on the elucidation of these ancient cycles. So that took place, we're told, on a plain some 20 miles south of the present city of Delhi. And that was a decisive battle between the forces of light and darkness. And some say that the lords of the dark face won that battle. Others say that they were driven back and the lords of the shining countenance won that battle. But even if the lords of the shining countenance won that battle, they decided for a time to withdraw from humanity gradually, because the occult secrets were being misused with terrible results upon the elemental lives of the planet, and knowledge then was withdrawn, occult knowledge, and it became necessary then for people to prove themselves once again over millions of years and to earn the right to possess this knowledge, which I think had been quite liberally given to humanity in the early days. It's the old thing, don't give too much too fast. It's always the second ray problem of over-bestowing, over-giving, which, as Master Morya says, creates weaklings, he says. So one must learn the art of proportional giving, or one may spoil in some way the one to whom the gift is with good intentions given. And that's something for us all to learn, I think. He says, Port Said, ruled by this sign, as all cities are ruled by various signs, is synonymous with the satisfaction of all the earthly and animal desires. I think we're talking very much of the sacral center here, and of the solar plexus, all the lower centers, but I think particularly the sacral center. It's synonymous with the satisfaction of all the earthly and animal desires of the baser sort, and is one of the wickedest cities in the world, a meeting place for the evil of 3 continents. And I suppose what we have is Africa, Europe, and Asia. North and South America and Australia and Antarctica are out of the picture here. So it is in Egypt and Africa. Asia is close and Europe is close. And it'd be interesting to see how the hierarchy rates the moral character of the various cities, where their influence can have a good effect, and perhaps where their influence is repelled because of the prevailing negative trends of the thinkers of those cities. But as evolution proceeds, going on, but as evolution proceeds, the power of the moon, which is the symbol and ruler of form, the moon, the mother of the form, Taurus, the mother of illumination, but in whom the moon is exalted because the form is to be illuminated. The power of the moon, which is the symbol and ruler of form, grows less and less, even as the moon is fading away now, becoming smaller and smaller, so that by the time of Earth's 7th round, probably a scheme round rather than a chain round on the 4th chain, the moon will have become very small and will have disintegrated and will have disappeared, and that will be a great symbolic and actual liberation for the planetary logos, because it will no longer be subjected to that particular quality of his, which was represented by the moon chain. And this will be very good for the Lord of the Earth chain, because that backward drag into the lower third aspect response will no longer be with us. But as evolution proceeds, the power of the moon, which is the symbol and ruler of form, grows less and less, and the man upon the reversed wheel, counterclockwise, is steadily freeing himself from the control of matter. And you can understand how good it would be to for a disciple to have the moon in Capricorn, as that whole lunar nature would come under the control. Lunar nature under the control of the spiritual will. And instinct would no longer, or instinct and instinctual desire would no longer control. The attractive lure of that which is material wanes increasingly. This is very much so in the higher Capricorn individual. And Saturn is the Lord of karma and the Lord of pain and the Lord of discipline, which is ruling the sign opposite that of the moon. Saturn opposes the moon in a way. Moon rules Cancer and Saturn rules Capricorn. Saturn sees to this putting of the moon in its proper place. Jupiter, which has been the ruler of Pisces and also Aquarius esoterically, and exoterically in Pisces, falls in this sign because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, and that exaltation too is not necessarily the most wonderful thing because it can see the fulfillment of the form represented by the moon to the detriment of the higher spiritual aspects. So remember, an exaltation can veil or shut out higher developments while it focuses on fulfillment through the form. Such is the case with early Jupiter. And we saw even Jupiter in Pisces represents, in the early days, that engulfing of the little fish, the soul, by all of the elemental nature with which it is confronted. So let's just say the early Piscean individual under Jupiter is in a way overwhelmed by all that relates to the earth and to the dense physical body of the planetary logos and solar logos, and is inimical to the development of soul and spirit. But anyway, we have a very important thing is going to be said here, because in relation to this fall of Jupiter in Capricorn, when is a fall not a fall? I think we'll see that in just a minute, because I have said before that every fall is really an exaltation. Every exaltation can be considered almost as a fall. It depends on what part of the individual is rising or falling. So this fall must be studied from two angles. For Jupiter in its lowest aspect gives the fulfillment of desire and satisfied demand. Well, you know, in a way, Capricorn being a very selfish sign, we can see that Jupiter would be falling away from his higher nature by giving fulfillment of desire and satisfied demand, because that's just what a Capricorn individual in early days would want. Whilst in its highest aspect, Jupiter is the outgoing expression of love, which magnetically attracts to itself that which is desired, this time for the good of the whole. That's a marvelous definition of Jupiter. The outgoing expression of love, outgoing too, because it's going beyond one ring past knot after another, wider still and wider. The ring past knots are expanding, or we are transcending the lesser and going to a still greater. Jupiter is the outgoing expression of love, which attracts magnetically to itself, very inclusively, that which is desired, this time for the good of the whole. Well, sometimes the very dense, rigid, materially focused attitude or atmosphere provided by Capricorn works against that outgoing expression of love. So in a way, that very high aspect of Jupiter falls in Capricorn because it cannot be expressed, at least at first. See, studying the falls and exaltations is a bit like studying the decanates, because they've said about the decanates, sometimes it's hard to know whether you're coming or going. Are you coming in one side of the wheel or the other side of the wheel, or can you read both simultaneously? DK has called it a very fluid area. And I think the esoteric way of looking at the falls and exaltations is similar. It's quite fluid. So in one respect, all of that fulfillment of desire, and that can be, in fact, very well achieved in Capricorn, but then Jupiter is falling away from its higher aspect. And its lower aspect is being exalted in Capricorn. And here, Jupiter's outgoing love is falling away from its higher aspect because in the early days of Capricorn, it just cannot be expressed. In Capricorn, therefore, Jupiter reaches its lowest point of expression in the densest material aspect. I mean, it can still give fulfillment and the acquisition of that which is desired, but it has fallen from its high potential, or at least it has not come close to achieving it. And then, as love and selflessness triumph eventually in the Capricornian individual as he approaches initiation, this lowest aspect of Jupiter, which is the fulfillment of low desire and satisfied demand of that desire nature, this lowest aspect vanishes and disappears. And it is to the fall. Well, if it vanishes and disappears, the lowest aspect, then it becomes possible for the higher aspect of Jupiter to be lifted up and, as it were, exalted. So a very great spiritual triumph can occur with Jupiter in Capricorn once the Capricornian individual is really oriented towards the secret of the soul and has fulfilled esoteric Saturn and is moving towards the meaning of Venus and its union of heart and mind and the bringer of loving illumination. Then Jupiter will fall away from its lowest aspect and be lifted up into a great panoramic expansion of consciousness as seen upon the mountaintop.